I came across this tweet the other day that said social media aggregation killed websites, blogs, and creativity on the wider internet. It really struck a chord with me because it kind of explains why social media isn't fun in the ways that it used to be. And it's something I've been thinking about for a while now. Specifically, how social media aggregation changed everything once it became powered by the algorithm that debuted on Instagram in 2016 and completely took over every other platform by 2023. And it's wild because most of us didn't realize it was happening, but when we look at where we once were with social media versus where we are now, it's pretty clear that the algorithm running our feeds today has completely transformed the social media landscape and arguably the entire internet and cultural landscape as we know it. From the way we use social media to how we discover culture, how we behave online, and how an entire economy was built around content and attention, the algorithm didn't just change our feeds, it changed the function of social media itself. Let's get into it. Okay, so just so we're all on the same page here, let's define what an algorithm is first. An algorithm is a data tracking system in which a combination of an individual's internet search history and browsing habits are used to present them with similar or related material on social media or other platforms. The material, or in this case, the content presented to people is based on things they like, the things they share, their watch time, and other social media engagement behaviors. Like if you've ever liked something or searched something up on TikTok and then that topic or whatever it was started to terrorize your For You page for a few days after, that's the algorithm at work. Now, the algorithm isn't one single system, it's more like a software, kind of like how all iPhones operate on iOS, and each version of iOS is different and updated with new features and fixes. So before the social media algorithm that we know today, specifically the recommendation algorithm, which is the one I'll be referencing when I talk about the algorithm that changed social media, the original algorithm worked differently, and posts were shown in reverse chronological order, where they would show up on people's feeds in the order that they were posted, going from newest at the top to oldest at the bottom. And because of that, social media feeds were limited to posts from people you followed and were friends with. Once you saw what everyone posted, there was really nothing left to see, unless of course you decided to pass your time browsing and looking through other people's pages. The only activity you were seeing from people outside of who you were connected to was through their engagement on your mutual friends' posts. In other words, the algorithm that existed back then wasn't deciding what content you saw, it was just organizing the order of when you saw it. As social media platforms grew, the people responsible for their algorithms quickly realized that chronological feeds were imperfect. Users who were the most active dominated people's scrolls, posts from quieter users got buried, and the more people that people followed and were friends with, the more chaotic everything became, and there's actually research to support this. A 2014 Cornell University study looked at how users experience overwhelm from the constant flood of content that they come across on social media. It found that people can only process so much information before their brain hits a limit, and this overload happens to people who are among the most active and popular users, which this makes complete sense. Another thing I read in the study is that when people scroll through social media content fast and fleetingly, they're less likely to be influenced by what they're seeing. But when they keep seeing the same things over and over again, naturally the opposite occurs. So basically, if a user sees an idea or a product or whatever, but they scroll right past it and never see it again, like how they would on a chronological feed, the chances of it sticking are slim. And when I first looked at this portion of the study, I was actually in disagreement with what I was reading because I was very influenced by the things coming up on my chronological Tumblr feed back in the day. And if you've used Tumblr heavily in the 2010 to 2014 era, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But when I considered the fact that this study was focused on Twitter, it actually made a lot more sense because the nature of those platforms were different, right? Like Tumblr was a very slow and curated space where you would only really follow accounts that fit the environment you were actively trying to create for yourself on there. Like the goal was to have your page be as stylized and aesthetic as hearing as possible. So in that respect, yes, you were influenced by being constantly exposed to the ideas and aesthetic types that you repeatedly saw based on what you followed. But since Twitter was more rapid because you were typically less selective about who you were following on there, and it was a place where people would basically have a stream of consciousness about what was on their minds and what was trending at the time, the overload was way more apparent and felt on Twitter. And because other platforms like Facebook and Instagram were also like Twitter in that respect, yes, once upon a time, people posted and engaged on Instagram casually. At a certain point, having a chronological feed could become very overwhelming after the amount of people you were following hit a certain number. So the findings in the Cornell study do make sense, and the critique of the chronological algorithm was spot on because it doesn't account for mental noise and information overload. Its basically core flaw was that once your digital world got too big, the chronological algorithm started to fall apart. To fix these shortcomings of the chronological feed, the algorithm at the time, platforms began introducing changes to it. And these algorithm changes would work to curate feeds that ordered posts based on the things that people would find the most interesting, which was exactly what we saw in the September of 2011 update to Facebook's news feed. In an update announcement shared by their engineering manager at the time, he said, "When you visit Facebook, you should see the things you're most interested in. We announced improvements to help you see more of what you care about and less of what you don't." This update basically merged everything into one streamlined feed where the most interesting stories were placed right at the top. And if you hadn't logged in a while, Facebook would show you what you missed first. And if you were a more frequent user, you'd see the most recent posts first instead. This move, this arguably pioneering move that Facebook made, really set the stage for the algorithm changes that were to come because no other platform at the time operated on a non-chronological algorithm. After Facebook introduced this update, other platforms began to follow suit, and over the next few years, their algorithms started to evolve this way too. While Facebook continued to tweak its own algorithm, YouTube was refining its recommendation system, and Instagram both launched and updated its Explore tab with the goal being to curate content based on what users would like. And by the time 2016 rolled around, Twitter began testing similar algorithm changes as well. And this is where the shift towards the recommendation algorithm had started to build its way to becoming the default for all social media platforms. So what did that look like? Well, in February of 2016, Twitter announced an update to the timeline's tweet distribution, where when you open the app, it'll first present you with tweets they believe you're most likely to care about, though still in chronological order. And then following those tweets will be everything else still in chronological order as well. Now, this wasn't a huge change in the user experience, but it did continue to build on the foundation that I had just mentioned Facebook had previously set. Then something big happened, something that none of us were conscious of the magnitude of at the time, and that's something being the biggest algorithmic change in social media history. In March of 2016, Instagram announced a fully ranking-based feed that ordered posts based on how likely you were to be interested in the content, your relationship to the person posting, and the post's timeliness. The reasoning behind this was that the average user misses about 70% of their feed. And by June of 2016, the update had rolled out to everyone. So 2016 was a year of big change for social, and it just continued to pick up from there. By the time 2017 rolled around, Instagram took it even further, adding suggested posts to people's feeds from accounts they don't follow, but that the app figured they'd probably like. And this is what actually now shows up on our feeds today once we've seen all recent posts from the people we follow. Though it might have seemed like a small update at the time, it was a major hint of the personalized For You feeds that were to come and really redefine how people scrolled on social media. And this era was eventually ushered into the social media ether by a platform none other than TikTok. As we went over, prior to TikTok, a social media algorithm was used to reorder and improve an already existing feed, right? But with TikTok, the recommendation algorithm became the feed. It became the app's whole function, which is why when you created and still first create a TikTok account, you're not prompted to, nor do you even really have to immediately follow anyone. The For You page is designed to be the TikTok experience. TikTok is made to bring you into a recommendation-based content machine that presents you with even more content based on what it learns from how you're engaging with what you're seeing. And this new way of experiencing social media, this core recommendation algorithm function, became the blueprint for every other social media platform when you look at the timeline of events. TikTok launched globally in 2017 and in 2018 here in the US, but it really started to grow rapidly in late 2019, early 2020, once the pandemic happened and a lot of people were spending time at home. And in a clear move to respond to TikTok's rapid growth, Instagram launched Reels in August of 2020, which then made its way to Facebook a year later, and YouTube launched YouTube Shorts a month after that in September. And these short form video sections of these platforms relied on the same algorithmic principles that made TikTok such a contender platform, which was an infinite personalized, recommendation-based feed meant to serve you a list of content that has been specifically tailored to your interests. Even X joined in on this algorithmic renaissance when they launched their For You page in January of 2023, and Tumblr also ended up launching their own For You page as well. And yeah, before we knew it, the recommendation algorithm that first launched on Instagram a few years prior in 2016 was the primary experience on TikTok, and then emulated by every other platform, all of a sudden became the social media standard. And if the biggest social media giants adapting the recommendation algorithm, specifically that of TikTok, isn't enough of a testament to it being a game changer, I think the fact that the algorithm being one of the main things up for negotiation between the pending US and China TikTok sale definitely is. Now, before we get into how the algorithm changed social media as we know it, I do want to fully acknowledge that while yes, all these changes were introduced to create a better user experience by presenting people with content that they actually care about, there's definitely another side to it for sure. Like, it's also a very business and growth oriented decision because while it's meant to serve us content suited to our interests, the recommendation algorithm also keeps us scrolling on these platforms longer and really basically in perpetuity. Because think about it, before the algorithm we know now, you couldn't even really doom scroll. In fact, the term doom scrolling wasn't even introduced into our vocabulary until Twitter, now X user Ashik Sadiq, coined the term in 2018, which was when the recommendation algorithm was already at play. Like, we went from once upon a time scrolling our feeds until we were all caught up to it being possible to scroll forever with no real stopping point. And once feeds became infinite, attention became currency, which meant that more time spent watching and engaging, the more ads platforms and now creators could sell. And our scroll essentially became a business model. Okay. So now that we've established why the recommendation algorithm was established in the first place, let's get into how it changed social media as we knew it. First off, the recommendation algorithm changed the immediate function and mechanics of how we use social media. Once upon a time, people got online with the purpose of seeing what their friends and family were posting. And many of us still log on with that purpose, but now that's also combined with another, which is seeing what awaits us in the content ether. And the data backs this up as well. At a panel discussion, YouTube's then Chief Product Officer reported that 70% of the time spent watching content on the platform comes from content suggested by their recommendation algorithm. And in a 2024 through 2025 internal data report Meta presented to the FTC, it was found that people's time spent with friends content fell to 17% on Facebook and 7% on Instagram. And with respect to TikTok, the numbers are pretty similar. The Washington Post reported that on average, users see videos from accounts they follow only 10% of the time, which makes it clear that social media's original purpose, connecting with people, has evolved into something entirely different, which is connecting with content. And at this point, it's not really about who you follow as much as it is about what you'll be shown. The recommendation algorithm also created a ripple through internet culture and cultural spaces and even mainstream culture. Walk with me here for a second. During the chronological feed era, niche online communities operated in their own bubbles of the internet, whether that was a MySpace group or a pocket of Tumblr. People who shared interests in a music genre or a fandom or whatever found community, safety, and shared appreciation, especially if those interests didn't fit into the mainstream yet. And because these spaces were sought out rather than served to them by a recommendation algorithm, being a part of these communities implied a genuine interest. So there was also an aspect of cultural protection, which some might call gatekeeping today. But when the recommendation algorithm was introduced, it changed the level of protection that was possible. The content that once required knowing where to look and how to find it was all of a sudden being served to more people and tested for engagement. And the fact that niche content that was once only frequented by its committed participants and community started to now reach more people meant more visibility and opportunity to become part of the mainstream that up until this point was really just crafted and curated by those controlling TV and radio and other forms of media. And so what was once subcultures were now subcultural pipelines. I mean, if you've been online and an active participant in internet culture over the last 15 to 20 years, I'm sure you'd agree that things like lo-fi music, SoundCloud rap, the cottagecore aesthetic, all the things that existed online way before the recommendation algorithm has had a significant rise in popularity due to exposure from it. And as a result, the line between mainstream and niche all of a sudden became blurred. It worked to a lot of indie artists' benefits though, which is why we saw Tyler the Creator, Kali Uchis, and Lana Del Rey, once super niche and indie artists who gained popularity online, begin to explode and either remain independent or leveraged their digital reach to negotiate favorable deals. I also think Young Lean is a really good example of the cultural impact of the recommendation algorithm. I am totally dating myself here, but I have to talk about it because I was there. I was a fan. I was listening to and appreciating his music with my subcultural counterparts back then in 2013. And almost a decade later, it becomes a trending TikTok sound. And I've seen the same thing happen to other artists too that I once appreciated with my subcultural contemporaries like Crystal Castles. And I actually think these songs turning into TikTok trends and audio years later recontextualized art that was once an intimate cultural experience and basically turned it into social media wallpaper, for lack of a better term, for millions of people to utilize in their content. And outside of surfacing indie and niche culture to the mainstream, the recommendation algorithm has also created more potential and speed for other creators and artists to blow up. Look at Ice Spice, Pink Pantheress, Monet McMichael, etc. It gives the possibility to become famous overnight, or at least in a fraction of the time that it used to take. The recommendation algorithm also caused an economic ripple, which I think we've all come to recognize. I mean, the reach and growth potential it's created by presenting content beyond immediate followers literally launched the creator economy, the industry that allows people to monetize their online presence, and is currently a $250 billion global force projected to reach $480 billion by 2027. You can be a paid YouTuber, TikToker, and monetize your Substack. And if not on the content creation side that's in front of the camera, you can also do work behind the scenes as a social media manager, a social media video editor, an influencer brand manager, etc. All roles that didn't really exist a decade ago the way they do now. The recommendation algorithm has also led to a behavioral ripple that's completely changed how people act on social media. Social media went from being a place to share with friends and family to being a place to perform for reach and keeping up appearances. Many of our feeds and even the content we share and that's shared with us has become less about connection and more about optimizing and chasing engagement and chasing the algorithm. I mean, see literally every rage and engagement baiting piece of content on your feed. And this isn't conjecture either. There are surveys that show when asked what they aspire to be when they grow up, over a quarter of kids say they want to be a content creator. And listen, I fully account for the fact that being a content creator is a real job and something people can aspire to be. I mean, I'm literally employed because of content creation and I actively champion it. But at the same time, because two things can be true at once, I do feel like it's led to a homogenized social media because the desire to become a content creator has kind of formularized content creation and the creativity that goes into it. You can see it being cultivated by many of the content gurus who share the same variation of tips and algorithm tricks that have become so copy-paste that a lot of content, and I'm saying a lot, not just all, but a lot of it definitely, just feels unoriginal and as though it's crafted to check off a list of like best practices rather than coming from a genuine place. Like influencer hands and the influencer voice, get ready with me to da-na-na-na-na, is a thing for a reason. Lastly, the recommendation algorithm has also created a sociological ripple by sparking the attention economy where grifters with contentious content thrive and users get pulled to engaging with it. And honestly, it's something you can be privy to, like you can know it exists, but ultimately not be able to like avoid being triggered by regardless, especially when it hits something emotional based on like your identities or personal values or beliefs. Because the way the recommendation algorithm works, every time we engage, even out of frustration or curiosity, it's going to read that engagement as interest. And then that feedback loop signals the system to serve more of it, pulling people deeper into echo chambers and pipelines, both good and bad, that amplify cultural, political, and lifestyle extremes. From looks maxing to the trad wife life, the algorithm doesn't really care what you believe or how you're impacted by what you see. It only cares that you keep watching. So yeah, that's the death of the chronological feed and how the recommendation algorithm changed social media forever explained. If you watched up until this point, thank you so much. And if you're interested in more videos on social media and digital culture, definitely hit that subscribe button because there's more to come. Till next time.